to Sports 101, a show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. Here at Sport 101, we expand our conversation to include the history, past, present, as well as in the making, and we also look at the game from a people, places, and cultural perspective. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure to follow me on social media at Coach_Harp412 and Facebook under the name Jamar Harp. Make sure you get social with Sports 101 and a litany of other shows on SportsZone Chicago by following SportsZone Chicago on social media. SportsZone Chicago is the world's only Black-owned sports talk app, and we want to share our views on sports with the world. SportsZone Chicago can be found on Twitter at SportsZoneCHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Remember, Sports Talk Chicago is a sports talk app. You can watch and listen to my show, the many others. Keep up with breaking sports news, your favorite team. If you missed something, don't worry about it. Go to YouTube and search SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to the channel. Once you do that, we need everyone to complete this final step. We need everyone, everybody, grandma, all of them, little baby. Please download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Now I would like to talk about this week's episode. The title of this week's episode, starring star podcast host Kobe Orr, is Podcast and HBCU Sports. Now, when you talk about sports talk radio, it exists in a big way. You could turn on your TV, YouTube, the radio, hear ESPN, a lot of different networks doing sports talk any hour of the day. You'll most likely see someone yelling about a big play, a controversial call, who they want on their favorite team within any sector of sports. If you go in your car and turn on the radio, there's more than likely a chance you'll find a sports talk show before too much time passes. If you look at the year 2020, due to the pandemic and other factors, the sports talk landscape has expanded beyond these two traditional medias into podcasting, a format that allows significantly more freedom and a significantly more flexible structure. What is a podcast? Simply put, a podcast is an audio program just like talk radio, but you subscribe to it on your smartphone or computer and listen to that particular show whenever you would like. The vast majority of these podcasts tend to be completely original content, not repurposing the radio and not following restrictions of a major network. Many escape the shackles of traditional radio formats to explore brilliantly original approaches and completely niche subjects. For example, they can be any length, from 1-minute news snippets to a three-hour in-depth conversation. They can be any frequency, from daily to monthly. They can be in any format. You can have a solo show such as this one. You can have a multi-person show with guests. You can have a reaction show like our star guest does today. And you can have multi-person audio drama shows. These podcasts can cover any topic, many of which would never be broached on the traditional radio. No matter what you're into, you'll find a podcast that suits the topic of your liking, and you can find out at any time you want. If you miss it, just subscribe to it and watch it when you get a chance. There's one confusion that surrounds podcasts, and is what is a podcast question relates to media outlets in reference to audio and video. Now, most podcasts are audio only, even though the video podcasts do exist. But in our sector, which is sports, video podcasts are skyrocketing this year, and video podcasts in different sectors, which is the main reason of this show today. Podcast has really grown out of a need for more background content and content on different subjects that are not broached by traditional media. Now, this means most likely something that can entertain you, educate you, or inspire you in the background of other activities that you're already watching. So basically what I'm saying is some of these podcasts can give you a different insight into what you're watching, how it takes and feels of different people from different sectors or cultures in America, and give you a broader landscape, or you can paint with a larger brush and see what's going on and maybe have a more critical view or lens. For example, one of the most common ways people listen is in their car. So if you can't listen to a podcast there, what do most people do? They'll put a video on and still listen to the audio content from their smartphones. In this same way, these podcasts are great for listening at the gym if you're mowing your lawn or, taking a journey to work. Most times people don't waste their time with the music industry now as they get older. They'll listen to different podcasts, focus again on their favorite sports team, region of the city, travel, whatever they're interested in. Sometimes these podcasts will get very specific, like triathlon racing, dog training, or they can be more general, leading to a happy life, DIY, etc. A lot of the podcasts are really simple, maybe just a few friends chatting about something that they're passionate about, and then some get more serious. You have different types of podcasts that are more polished and super professional, that include theme music, sound effects, and professional editing. An example of this would be dating relationship expert Kevin Samuels and his podcast that has skyrocketed recently. The more professional podcasts are very great to listen to, but they take more time and money to produce, and they oftentimes have restrictions from their sponsors. The amateur shows, however, on the other hand, have a few rough edges, but the means they can get it out is whenever they want. They can grow a great loyal following, again, such as the CFL podcast that we'll discuss today, and they have no restrictions. In reality, most people listen to both types of podcasts. The biggest factor in these podcasts is the host or host and who you're going to gravitate to, who gives you an image of wanting to come back, who gives you great information and something that you can take away and maybe teach others. In regard to sports, and particularly historically Black college and university sports, amateur podcasts have taken the forefront in this sector and getting information out to its fans, breaking news, and providing a platform to show love and appreciation for their schools and its target market. I was talking with the guest today before the show, and I expressed my sentiments on how grateful I am not only to him, but several other trailblazers in this sector that are exposing historically Black college and university sports to the world. In previous episodes, we talked about, in particularly, the 1975 NFL draft, where you had Dr. Doom, Walter Brazil, Walter Payton. So that's two players from Jackson State and one player from Grambling taken in the top 10. We've also discussed how in 1979, Howard Schnellenberger's first year as the University of Miami head coach, how they played Florida A&M in Tallahassee and lost. And the next year he created the state of Miami, where FAMU players went to Miami and thus creating the U Dynasty. So we talked about the origins and significance of historically Black college sports, in particular football, and it's so great to see amateur podcast hosts taking this torch and running with it and lighting a flame that has not been done by traditional media as of yet. Now, major networks have neglected this sector for years, and these next generation podcast hosts embrace HBC sports, and I believe all of them will become great in this sector. Since the beginning of sports media has been catered to Power 5 or predominantly white institutions, and HBCUs have lacked media coverage, especially daily media coverage nationally for its fans or for people that they have no knowledge of this sector and wanted to be fans. With social media platforms becoming more available, they're offering an opportunity for individuals to gain presence for themselves and increase coverage of HBCU sports. Several individuals have taken the banner in promoting HBCU sports, and I'd like to talk about them right now. Our first individual would be Off Script, Mr. Abrion Scott, the podcast host of Off Script Sports Podcast. This podcast was again created last year by its proprietor, Abrion Scott, aka Scotty. Off Script covers all aspects of HBCU sports, including bands, dance teams, social media coverage, and a lot of different factors outside of the playing field or surface, hence the name Off Script. Our next, Our next trailblazer I'd like to talk about is Big Zach McKinnell. Big Zach McKinnell is the host of the Blue Bloods college football broadcast and the Blue Bloods Sport Network. Now, Big Zach, I don't think he sleeps. Y'all gonna think I'm laughing or cracking jokes, but Zach covers HBCU sports, FCS, Power 5, high school, Pee Wee football, Madden tournaments, backyard games. He's a wealth of information, and he is a blessing to have in this sector. So again, please subscribe to Off Script at YouTube, which is right here again, and the Blue Blood Sport Network, which is also found on YouTube as well. Our next individual would be Mr. Jeff Lightsey Jr. Mr. Jeff Lightsey Jr. is the host of the Black Boss podcast channel. You can see him right here. This was a show about 2 weeks ago with our special guest today, the host of the CFL podcast. Mr. Lightsey focuses on SWAC sports, how they can improve and compete on a national level with other FCS teams, and the intricacies involving these teams as they progress through the offseason. Now, last but not least, is our main guest for today, our special guest, Mr. Kobe Orr of the CFL podcast. Kobe, he does videos like Master P, and they drop like every 3 days. And he focuses on the difference between Mr. Orr and the other individuals is he looks at the SWAC as well, but due to his location in South Carolina, shout out to the Low Country, George Bulldog Smith, Artist Woods, Low Country Boils. I don't eat this pork, but I enjoy a Low Country Boil. He's from South Carolina, so he does a lot of great coverage in regards to the MEAC as well. So again, SportsZone Chicago, Sports101, and all the guests of the CFL podcast, I'd like to welcome Mr. Kobe Orr to our show. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Orr.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. I really do appreciate it. Always appreciate it.
No problem. Now, you have great film critiques as well as critiques on HBC football as a whole. Like, how do you get your football knowledge, or where does it come from?
So I've always been a lover of football, but I would say, like, ever since I was a kid, right, I would watch NFL Total Access. I would watch like all these in-depth shows on just football. So like any little nuance that they were saying, like I picked up on it and, just kind of stuck in my brain, and like just watching those kind of shows every day, watching that, like you would think the NFL paid me as a kid to cover the NFL draft, because I would watch all 7 rounds and I would hear all the critiques and everything that they said of the players. So, just kind of doing that since I was a kid, my knowledge of the game kind of grew a lot faster than most kids or even adults around me. So, I would say that's where it came from for sure.
Okay. Now, did you continue that knowledge and passion into high school sports and compete, or did you compete on a college level? Could you tell me more about your sport upbringing before we get into your podcast origins?
Yeah, so I played football all 4 years of high school. Went to Bluffton High School for like a couple of years. Came back to my hometown of Richland, where I played ball there as well. Had a few scholarships. I think it was a school in Kansas that I forget the name of. A couple JUCOs, and then Limestone College. The grades needed to be better. So Limestone is the school that offered me. I wanted to go to South Carolina State, but they were done recruiting by the time they got back to me. So yeah, Limestone offered me. I went to Limestone College, which was a new program at the time, Division II. Went there, academically redshirted. So I could be at the practices, I can be at everything like that, but I couldn't participate until I got my grades up, and I knew that. So I was recording practice and everything like that, and I was talking to coach every day. He was like, can't wait to get you. He was making sure my grades were straight and everything like that. So okay. By the time my freshman year was over and I got above a 3.0, he came and told me the day before I left for the summer. He was like, "Hey, you're eligible. You're ready to play now." Boom. I'm working out in the off season because I'm ready to go. And then I get a call. And I was like, my roommate was like, "Hey, coach got fired." And I was like, "Oh man." And then, Coach Furry, who comes from the NFL, right? He calls me up. He's the new head coach, and he says, basically, we got kids that we want to recruit. We're gonna have to take your scholarship, but you can still walk on. I couldn't afford the school without my scholarship, so I had to transfer, and I did so much work. And that was the end of my playing days. But yeah, I played all 4 years of high school.
Okay.
It didn't work out the way I wanted to at the college level, but I was still grateful that I got to at least know what it was like a little bit to be a college athlete.
I understand. Well, hopefully, like we talked about before the show, well, not hopefully, as this progression continues, you will be taking part in collegiate sports on the professional side and management side. So I have no worries about that. So let's talk about the origins of the CFL podcast. What kind of led you to start this? And what were your inspirations in starting the podcast?
So I don't think anybody knows this. I wanted to start a YouTube channel from the beginning, right? I knew I wanted to do so. So the very first time I made my channel, I was uploading vines. I was nowhere near thinking about talking about football, but I would always talk about football, especially HBCU football, to my girl. Because she likes to listen. She enjoys sports and everything like that. And finally, she was like, you talk about this a lot. Why don't you make a channel about it? Why don't you, it costs nothing for you to make a YouTube channel and talk about this. Because by that point I had abandoned my YouTube channel. So I came back and I decided, why not? Why not talk about HBCU football? Because I was always talking about how HBCU football could be up here if we all just, put our efforts into it. And then Deion Sanders came, right? And then it was just the perfect timing for me to start my YouTube channel. And then, I got on Deion in Jackson State. And when I initially started my channel, I was trying to do FBS and FCS football. That was just too much. I decided to just focus on FCS, HBCU, period, because that just became more intriguing to me. I didn't care about FBS. I didn't care about other FCS schools. HBCU football became more interesting to me. So I just focused on that. And when I started making videos, I didn't expect to get views. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't expect to get any views, but I was gaining attention at a rapid pace. And I was kind of surprised by it. And I was like, okay, well, let me try this. Let me try that. And it just kept growing. And, it exceeded my expectations. And I thought to myself, like, okay, I can really build something with this channel. Like, this is it for me. So, that's how it got started. So almost a year later, here we are at 6,000 subscribers. I never would have.
That's an amazing story. Now, when you first started, did you notice the lack of people in this HBCU lane and what you were doing in regards to the your podcast? And can you tell the audience what basically your podcasts are about, or paraphrase?
Yeah. So my podcast is basically covering SWAC and MEAC football, right? I want to. Anything recruiting wise, I got you, right? Like if you, because here's my thing. I've watched enough FBS content to know that HBCUs deserve the same thing. Like the little insides we get, the little shorts that we get of, players arriving on campus and, you're just getting an in-depth look to what these guys are doing outside of practice and outside of the games. Fans eat that up. Fans enjoy that. They want to know more about their program. So I figured, why wouldn't the SWAC and the MEAC want to know about that? So that's why that's what my channel is. Any small nuance to any big thing. Like, you want to know who your school is going after in next year's recruiting class or 2 years down the line, I got you. You want to know who committed, I got you. You want to know any little small detail about your program, big or small, I'm on that. Because when I first started, I was looking at the social media pages for these HBCU schools, and some of them haven't been active since 2009, and things of that nature. So I figured, well, if they're not doing it, I knew of Oscar. He was him and Cut Day were the only two other channels I knew of at the time. But I figured, well, why don't I jump in and do this as well? The more the merrier.
Exactly. And for the listening audience, This takes a lot of time and effort. I'm mentioning another individual in this lane, Blue from Blue Bloods. He does so much. He started off with a co-host because they were doing BCS and FCS, and he kind of tailored down a bit because it's so much. Now, this information is public knowledge. You just have to spend a lot of time researching. Case in point, as a college coach, when we offer kids, you go on their Twitter and you can find out a lot of information just by watching people's Twitters and subscribing, and they'll tell you everything. So, or they'll post videos of what they're doing. Right, went to this school, and Mr. Orr right here, not only outside of having his regular job, this is a second job because the amount of time he spends to get the information, then he has to make the podcast for you. For a 20-minute podcast, he could have spent 8 hours of research. And that's what people don't understand. So not only should be Mr. Orr, but Scotty, Cut Day, Jeff Lightsey and the Black Blouse channel, Blue Bloods Network. Everyone should be commended for the amount of research they're doing without a research assistant from a major company or corporation. This is all their two hands and their 2 or 4 eyes, depending on if they wear glasses. So could you kind of touch on that a bit, on the work you do to go into a show that most people may not realize?
So in the beginning, it's a little easier now for me because I have people, fans of schools who voluntarily send me information that I may overlook. So it's a little easier now. But in the beginning, it's still very time consuming because I have to, like you said, you can find out the information through Twitter and everything like that, but I'm constantly revolving through Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, through those SWAC pages and MEAC pages just to catch up on the latest news. 1400 Club with the Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club, all of those things. I'm constantly throughout the day looking, and it can become time consuming. Like when I'm at work, I scroll just a little bit just to see if anything happens. On my breaks, I'm scrolling just to see if anything happens. I'm constantly talking to my channel subscribers, my insiders for these certain programs just to see what's going, because there's always news. There's always news. So yeah, it's a lot of that. And then when you finally got something to talk about or something to make a video on, you gotta do research on it. You gotta do extensive research on it. You gotta write those notes down. You got to remember it because I don't go live a lot. I pre-record my stuff, so I have to remember these things to memory. Then make sure I get it right. I gotta hit up a certain player for his stats because it wasn't available where I was looking at. Like it's a lot. It's a lot that goes on with it. You got to make the video. You got to edit the video. Then you got to get it out in a timely manner. On top of still dealing with your regular life outside of that. So yeah, it's a lot of work that goes into it.
Definitely. And again, you did a great job this recruiting cycle, not only with Jackson State and the rest of the SWAC teams, but letting the world know about South Carolina State. I also would like to reflect that Mr. Orr right here was the only one that predicted South Carolina State, and I think off script, that South Carolina State would win the Celebration Bowl. So he should be credited with that prediction when everybody else thought it would be a blowout. Again, he had called the Celebration Bowl, weeks before everyone else. Now, speaking of the Celebration Bowl, the MEAC and the SWAC are the 2 FCS or Division I HBCU conferences. In your view, Kobe, what is if you did a SWOT analysis, basically looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, could you give me a little or your insight on both conferences? How they're the same, how they differ, which one you think is better on the field, which one is better off the field, etc.
See, when it comes to MEAC and SWAC, I think they play 2 different brands of football. Both can be very effective, but I really do think the MEAC is more rugged, right? Like they more hands in the dirt, blue collar kind of a conference. And then the SWAC, they can be a little pretty boyish, a little flashy, like they love the flash and everything like that. And I think that kind of contributes to the mindset that the teams of both these conferences have. Like you get the Jackson States and other schools in the SWAC who think when they face a team like South Carolina State or any team for the MEAC, it's a given, right? Like they really believe that. And then you got the MEAC who people don't really pay attention to because they don't have the celebrity coaches, because they don't really have the outside of Howard, they don't really have the facilities of these SWAC schools. They get overlooked, so they develop the underdog mentality, and they come out and they prove you wrong on each and every time. So I think that's really the difference between these two schools. People need to stop. I can say this: people need to stop looking at the MEAC how they do, because the MEAC has consistently been putting out NFL talent, and I mean guys who are going to the NFL and playing well. They don't have the money. They might not have the money of the SWAC. They might not have the facilities, but they really have quality coaching, and they can really develop kids and get them to the next level. So I really feel like people need to stop, looking down on the MEAC. But I think that's the difference between the MEAC and the SWAC. They play a different brand of ball.
I definitely agree with you, and I like to share two stories that kind of cement basically what you said. So the first story, as I told you earlier, I started my coaching career at Grambling while I was a graduate assistant, and right before I was leaving in 2006, that's when they first started the celebration, or the MEAC SWAC challenge at the beginning of the season. And the first game was between Grambling and Hampton. Now, I wasn't going to be at the game because I had to go do my internship in Atlanta to graduate. But, before I left, I was talking to some of the coaches, and they were saying, we going to beat them. We straight off the boat. They not from the South. And I was like, Virginia's the South. Maryland's the South.
Right.
We the real South. And them boys, and I've been hearing that, my whole life because, I'm from Pittsburgh, PA, but I played college football, North Carolina Central. Predominantly, I went to some other schools where I mainly played at North Carolina Central, and then went to Grambling for my master's. So I've been hearing so long there's no athletes, like we got off different boats or something. And they would compare 2 states or 3 states, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, to like 10. So they were saying all this, we got bigger boys, and Hampton won that game. They had a linebacker named Justin Durant that went to the NFL. I think that's when Mathis, Jerome Mathis was on that team, who also went to the NFL, and some other guys, and Hampton won, and they started that streak. My second story is when I was on a coaching staff at North Carolina Central, we got a head coach from Prairie View that had just won the SWAC, Henry Frazier III. And when he was hired, I presented him with a quantitative analysis. And basically what I did was I went to and this is something you can do when you get to graduate school. I went to the SWAC page and took the top offense and see how much they rush for, or the number one rushing offense, and compared it to the MEAC. And I did the same thing with passing. And what I found out was the number one rushing team in the SWAC would have been like the 5th best rushing team in the MEAC. And the number one passing team in the MEAC would have been the 5th best passing team in the SWAC. So that quantitates what you just said. And I also agree with you that, again, it's the style of play. And also, again, we talk about culture on this show too. It's a cultural mindset that, the Black folks are different from in the North. And Virginia's not the South. And Maryland's not the South. So there's some ignorance in a lot of the areas, but I do agree with you that there's a different style of play in both conferences. And even though the SWAC is more flashy, the MEAC puts out way more NFL players. If you look at the last Rookie of the Year, he's a linebacker from South Carolina State.
Right.
So that basically shows it right there. So now moving forward, we talked about the Celebration Bowl, and obviously this year you predicted it. The South Carolina State manhandled Jackson State in the Celebration Bowl this year. Can you talk about that team and the season, as well as the trench play that kind of, basically they made Jackson State quit. They punched them in the mouth. They hit them hard. Their punter was out there making tackles. It was an all-around physical victory. Can you kind of give your thoughts on this year's Celebration Bowl?
So the Celebration Bowl, I knew South Carolina State was going to win it simply because of the personnel that they had on that team. You got multiple NFL guys on that defense alone, not to even mention Shaq Davis on offense. But I think the reason why that game turned out the way it did was because of the mindset of Jackson State. See, I cover Jackson State a lot, and the majority of my subscribers are Jackson State fan bases. So I saw the comments, right? Oh, look at their record. We got this in the bag. Why are they even in the Celebration Bowl? Who do they have? We don't know about South Carolina State. And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at Jackson State and I'm like, listen, y'all have not even dominated your conference, the way you were predicted to. So for you, don't come in here, don't give South Carolina State bulletin board material. They have NFL guys as well. Nobody listened, right? So even when I interviewed the South Carolina State players, they even during the banquet, they were talking, they were chirping, they thought they had it in the bag. I think they came in with the wrong mindset, right? And then on their way to the Celebration Bowl, you find out during the flight that you got the number one recruit in the country. Oh, you're just elated right now. You're not focused. Yeah. You're elated because you're thinking like, oh, everything's going right. Nothing can go wrong. This is going to be the storybook. This is going to be a storybook ending. And they came out and they punched you in the mouth because you didn't do your research on Shaq Davis and the fact that he averaged 20 yards per catch for the past 2 seasons. You didn't do your research on Jacoby Durant and how he is a future NFL draft pick. And if he's over 6 foot, he goes probably second or third round.
Yeah.
Right? You didn't do your research on BJ Davis, the linebacker, who's also going to get a shot at the NFL, or Zafir Kelly. You didn't do your research. So for that reason alone, when the game started and they exposed your weakness, CJ Holmes in the slot, they exposed him when they threw it. When you were ignorant enough not to put your best corner in DeJohn Nugget Warren on Shaquan Davis. You were ignorant enough not to do that, so they took advantage of it. He never made adjustments. That tells me that you didn't do your homework. You thought you had it in the bag. That's why they got blown out the way that they did. That's why they got manhandled the way that they did. And I think they know now not to do it anymore.
I definitely agree because before the game, all you heard was James Houston, and being an interior coach, offensive line coach, I saw freshmen and sophomores dominate him. And Jablonski, even though he may be quote unquote bad built, he dominated Jackson State. And a lot of people don't realize that James Houston was dominated by freshmen and sophomores.
And James has came up big all year. Every time Jackson State has needed him in the SWAC, he has come up. I think 14 and a half sacks, 20 and a half tackles for loss, 60 tackles overall. That's great production, right? He was great in the SWAC. So we all were surprised to see him get dominated the way that he did in that Celebration Bowl. But they really did key in on James. That I can say. South Carolina State actually did their research, right? So when I was talking to Jablonski and I was talking to Shaq, they said when they were in film, James was the one guy that they made sure was not going to beat them. They made sure that they doubled down on that just because they knew about his production and everything like that. But even yet and still, I was very surprised that he got dominated the way that he did. I wasn't expecting it.
Well, I look at it, Kobe, again from basically Jackson State being out coached because, again, being an offensive line coach, those blitzes that they didn't come through. You didn't see Aubrey Miller. They would do like I watched tape with a critical eye. So they would do blitzes where they would leave the B gap open. And since he can't cover, they would rush him in the B gap. So he's basically a 3 technique. None of that worked. The other end, the light skin, the little light boy they had on the other D end, Miles he wasn't getting home. Yeah, Miles. Yeah, none of them. So to me, it was Jackson State got out coached, and they were out coached, and particularly in the trenches because they Jackson State had no answers to their blocking scheme, in which they slid a protection to James Houston, and again you leave the other side man on man. And those D linemen couldn't get home for Jackson State. You didn't see Aubrey Miller breaking through the backfield, throwing up the hooks or nothing. That freshman and sophomore O-line got the job done.
They did.
Against BCS transfers, this quote-unquote BCS defense. And no one realizes that. And all 5 of those guys are going to come back. They're going to get their man bodies. And, I'm excited for this year's MEAC season.
For sure. And, they really moved like a well-oiled machine on that offensive line when I was watching them. I was thoroughly impressed with Jackson State because even I didn't think they were going to be able to run on that defense. I mean, just like you said, the FBS transfers, James coming from Florida, Cornus Miller, a former four-star defensive tackle coming from Auburn, Katron Evans, who had over 50 offers as a four-star prospect, just a true freshman. I didn't expect them to be able to do what they did. So, yeah, it was definitely just out-coaching Jackson State.
Yeah, and then look what they did in the end zone. They went Randy Moss, big ball a couple times, and they took advantage of the slot, took advantage of a tight end on a shallow climb route, and he scored on that. So it looked like one team watched film and the other team they were ERW that week. That means they ate, they rode, and they warmed up. They weren't ready to play. That's what I tell some of my players, man. You're an ERW guy, man. Go stand on the sideline. Mm-hmm. Now speaking of that, I want to go into recruiting. So if you look at South Carolina State's recruiting class, how would you compare that recruiting class to these vaunted recruiting classes of the SWAC, in particular Jackson State, Grambling, FAMU, and Alabama A&M?
Highly, highly underrated. South Carolina State's class is highly underrated. Now, South Carolina State has one of the lowest recruiting budgets in the NCAA, so they can't afford to go out and really recruit around the country like these other schools can. But the kids that they find in state and in close neighboring states are kids who have a lot of potential and just can be developed in a way. But the good news about this year is because they won the Celebration Bowl, they didn't have to really go search for a lot of recruits. Their phone was ringing off the hook, which is why they were able to get a few three-star prospects. This is why you're able to get arguably the fastest player in the state of South Carolina. Kids who are offered by Power 5 schools, quite a few of them. They were able to pull them away from those Power 5s and bring them to Orangeburg because of them winning that Celebration Bowl. So yeah, they're highly underrated. But I can't put them above the JSUs or anything like that just because of the Travis Hunters and the Kevin Colemans of the world.
Definitely. Now I remember how South Carolina State used to recruit because in South Carolina, if a lot of people don't know, the FCS options are South Carolina State, Winthrop, Wofford, and then military schools. And if you look at the history of South Carolina, with South Carolina just stopping flying a Confederate flag a few years ago, a lot of people, if they stayed in state for FCS, didn't want to go to those other schools. So what South Carolina State would do is they would take gray shirts and Prop 48 them, meaning individuals that weren't eligible for Division I out of high school, they would get admitted to South Carolina State and sit a year. And South Carolina State always had monsters. I'm talking about Derricott. They had huge O-line. Jermaine Derricott was a monster at running back. I don't know if you remember that name, but they had some great players. Jalen Scoop Simmons from North Carolina. He was a candidate to sign at Duke. And then he turned down Duke and went to South Carolina State. And these are 6'2" running backs I'm talking about. So again, if you ever paid attention, a lot of SWAC fans are delusional. The MEAC teams are bigger, stronger, and faster than the SWAC teams.
Very.
But yet the SWAC is better because they're in the deep South. So, that doesn't make sense to me. So getting back to this signing class, I just want to go over a few athletes and get your thoughts on them. The first is quarterback right here, Andre Washington out of Ridgeview High School. Can you give your thoughts on Andre, Kobe?
So Andre Washington is a kid who has a extremely big arm, right? Like I love the kid's arm. He can provide the run game if you need it. I think he had over 500 yards or 81 attempts this past season. But great size at 6'4", 200 pounds, really big arm. I like him a lot, but the other two kids that they got at quarterback in this class as well he gonna have a real battle on his hands when it's time for Corey Fields to leave, and that starting job is up in the air.
Now, do you see anyone in this class pushing Corey Fields? Now we know how Corey Fields can be. He's not consistent. It's in particular, if you look at the first half of the Celebration Bowl, as well as some other games throughout last year's MEAC and non-conference play. Do you think any of these incoming freshmen can challenge Corey Fields for the starting quarterback position?
Yes, I do. I don't think they'll win it in like spring ball or anything. I think Corey Fields is going to get his shot. But if he is starting to
Corey Fields,
be Corey Fields, if he's starting to get in the way of his team's success with his up and down erratic play, then one of these kids is going to come in, and if they play well, they'll take it from them. But yeah, you got the number one dual threat quarterback in the country. South Carolina State has him. They have another 3-star dual threat quarterback who's actually ranked higher than them. They have him. So they have a couple of guys who have the same game as Corey Fields, who's a lot more accurate at this point than Corey Fields, who could definitely take his job. But they're not going to win it in the spring or anything. It all depends on how Corey Fields comes into this season and plays.
Okay, so CFL prediction. If Corey Fields is the same Corey Fields, week 4, which freshman takes his job and is a starting quarterback?
It's a hard one, right? Because I want to say Zan Dunham. I want to say Zan. Matter of fact, that's what I'm going with. Zan Dunham, right? Zan Dunham. He's a 3-star quarterback. Great scrambler, right? The boy got sweet feet. He's Houdini in the pocket, but he's also able to deliver that throw. But I think Zan could be the one to take him out for that job, or it'll be Prometheus Franklin II, the actual number one dual threat quarterback in the country. 4.6 speed, throws the ball with a lot of zip. It's either going to be one of those two guys, but I'll give Zan the slight edge.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And as always, I love to see that, and hopefully you can watch this quarterback competition through the CFL podcast next year. So again, everyone, please subscribe to the CFL podcast on YouTube. Search CFL podcast. Our next athlete I'd like to ask you about is Cyrus Ellison, the receiver out of Hannah Pamlico. And what do you think he'll provide to the team this upcoming season?
So I just started looking at him a couple of days ago. Tremendous athlete, like just freakish athlete. When I look at him, it was kind of hard for me to compare him to somebody, right? Because when I see him, all I see is him just winning contested 50-50 balls every single play on this highlight tape. Mm-hmm. Dude is just a freakish athlete, can play basketball as well. So I really think that helps with this game a lot as at receiver. I don't really know how he is as a route runner because I haven't seen him run many routes, but he's a kid who I'm overall excited about for South Carolina State. And whenever he steps on the field, I think he should get a chance at some playing time this year. But whenever he steps on the field, I think he's going to be lights out. He could actually be their next number one receiver after Shaquan Davis.
Now, speaking of Shaq Davis, can you give us a kind of SWOT analysis on him, what he's going to need to do to get better instead of just using his height, maybe improve on his route running so he can be that next MEAC player that goes pro?
All right, so with Shaq, right, things he does well, he uses that size. He uses his body very well. You saw that in the Celebration Bowl, the way he's able to shield off defenders and make the play. I would like to see him get a little bit more separation when he's running his routes. That's something he could work on. I want to see him healthy. He doesn't have an injury problem, right? But the big games of last season, the FBS games, New Mexico State, Clemson, he wasn't available. And had he been available for at least the New Mexico State game, they pull off that upset. So I want to see him healthy. I want to see him get more separation in his routes, and I think that's the biggest thing knocking Shaquan Davis. He's fast. He's fast already, right? He does a lot of things right. I just want to see him get more separation. And, of course, he can always become a better route runner.
Definitely. And I think I do agree with you, having him with a help against those non-conference games. Because, again, if you look at the MEAC's track record recently against, in particular, FBS opponents, you got North Carolina A&T, who is now in the Big South Conference. They beat East Carolina. You had Howard beating UNLV. who was playing? Was it South Carolina State? They were playing Arizona, and the quarterback cramped up. They was about to beat them.
I don't think that was. I don't think that was something.
No, it was another MEAC team. It was Howard. And then A&T lost a close one to Kent State. So again, these teams are beating. If you listen to the SWAC narrative, especially on the podcast, is the SWAC doesn't want to play anyone else outside their conference, and they haven't beat a Division One BCS team. Yet the MEAC has done it like 3 or 4 times, but no one talks about that, which is confusing to me. Especially a small school like Howard, when they beat UNLV, that was huge.
That's a great point. Why nobody talks about that, I don't know. But, that actually irks me about the SWAC a lot, is that a lot of them just refuse to play outside of the SWAC. And if they do, it's Division II schools. And I hate seeing these schools play Division II schools, right? And I know we're all waiting on Jackson State's schedule to come out. I just can't. I can't stand to see the Division II schools on the schedule. Even if you don't want to go and play the top FCS schools, the lower tier FCS schools like a McNeese, like they're out there for you. You don't even have to go FBS if you don't want to, but please play somebody outside of the SWAC conference. Play a formidable opponent. They don't want to do so, but they still get the attention. It irks me a little bit.
Yeah, now before these quote-unquote celebrity coaches came to the SWAC, they joke about the SWAC, like most of their linemen will be like 6 foot, 360, where the MEAC offensive and defensive linemen look like, pros.
Right.
You had a few people in the SWAC, like when I was at Grambling, Jason Hatcher, but he transferred in. He played about 10 years for the Dallas Cowboys. Tariq Armstead from Pine Bluff, obviously is a starter. But you find majority of the linemen, come from the MEAC. So that's another point why the MEAC dominates, because they have better interior line play.
Right.
Now, this next individual I want to talk about, I got to show. Can you see the screen, Kobe?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, so this next individual right here, I had to pull his film up. This is Shamonte Burris. This is who Kobe was talking about earlier. He's from Lake City High in South Carolina, and you'll see why he is called the fastest player in South Carolina. So let's watch Mr. Shamonte Burgess work. You see right there, once his shoulders got squared, no one's touching him. Did you ever get to see him play in person, Kobe?
No, I didn't, because I was real busy this past season. So I wanted to go to a lot of games and I couldn't. But I am going to be at a lot of games this season, because I have to see this class with South Carolina State in person. I have to.
Yeah. Now, one thing I would recommend is, I would contact these outlets and ask for a media pass from the CFL podcast.
Yeah,
they can get you one. Yeah.
And I've been trying to get one for the Orange Blossom Classic coming up next year, but it's real hard to get one from Jackson State's programs. But South Carolina State, I have been in talks with people. I'm trying to see who I can get in contact with to get a media pass from them. Delaware State, I'm gonna see some of their games. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely do so.
Okay. Now you see him right here on defense too. Now he's gonna play strictly running back at South Carolina State, but again, you can see the athleticism and the speed. We'll show a few more clips, and then we'll get to our guest, and we'll critique Mr. Shamonte Burgess. Again, you see he's about 15 yards away from everybody else on defense. We'll do a few more clips, and then we'll again get back to our special guest. Woo!
Speed is just blazing, man.
Yeah. And what most people don't realize is South Carolina State is known for running backs.
Right.
All right, so now can you tell us a little bit about Shamonte Burgess, what other schools he turned down for South Carolina State, and expectations for him in this upcoming fall?
So Shamonte Burgess at 5'10", 170, right? Dude can really outrun any angle you got on him. That's just how fast he is, right? It's not just the speed, it's the acceleration as well. So he can really take the top off of your defense. He really has surprising hops. Like he can really jump when he needs to. I don't think a lot of people know that about him. I saw some clips on him like really jumping and high pointing the football at his highest point. But just a fluid route runner, an absolute playmaker, a kid who can contribute in the return game right away if you need him to. A few schools that wanted him: Howard, Presbyterian, Savannah State, Limestone. There was a school who have actually offered him, but the schools who are looking at him but just never offered were Appalachian State, Clemson, Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern. Those are schools who were keeping a close eye on him, but never actually officially offered, which was their loss. But
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. Overall, great kid, and I hopefully I see him on the field next year because I really think South Carolina State could use some speed like that right now.
Now with that crowded backfield, how do you think they'll use him? Will he be more third down, swing pass, screen back, or outside zone? How do you think they'll use him with all the other running backs that they have?
See, he can really be a gadget guy if that's what you need him to be. You don't really have to use him primarily because he still needs to bulk up, so he can't be a every down kind of player right now. Yeah. But I do think you can use him as a gadget guy in certain situations. Put him on a mismatch, let him outrun somebody, get you to play when you need the play to be made. That's the kind of role I think he can play in this freshman season.
Definitely. And then special teams, South Carolina State wasn't too good in the return game last year. Do you think he'd be an impact as a kick and punt returner?
Right away with that speed. You have got to see at the very least, because they didn't have anybody back there last year. Mm-hmm. No, he's electric. This kid is lightning in the bottle.
Thank you so much for your critique. Now, again, going back to this past year, the CFL podcast has grown since its inception to 6,000 followers. Again, we need 6,000 more. So anyone in the listening audience that's listening now will listen on SportsZone Chicago, on YouTube, or any replays on our apps, as well as the CFL podcast. We need 6,000 more subscribers, and after that, another 6,000 more. So after this first year, which was tremendous, and I again applaud you. Can you give us a little insight on what you think the future of the CFL broadcast will be? Any things you might have coming up in the works, visions, how you're going to move the program going forward?
Yeah, so everything that I'm doing now, I'm going to continue to do, but I am in the process of adding on a call-in show, like how Off Script does. I'm not biting Off Script or anything, but like how Off Script does. So certain situations, I want to be able to hear from the subscribers in real time and the fans of these programs, so we can talk and give our thoughts on things together instead of just me reading comments and everything like that. So that's coming. A lot more. I want to get bigger interviews. I want to get guys that's playing in the NFL. I want to get prominent figures on ESPN or SportsCenter. I'm really trying to knock it out the park with the interviews. Like I want to hit home now. A lot more in-depth player interviews, guys who don't know about, particularly in the MEAC, right? Because they don't get a lot of coverage. So guys like Asias Guthrie, who I interviewed, who's a very good player, one of the best DBs in the MEAC. Kids like that you don't really know about. More interviews on that, and hopefully we can just continue to grow while I'm doing so. That's what I have coming up in the works right now.
Definitely, and I feel that as well. One thing I can tell you, good brother, is you go to these schools and build these relationships with these SIDs. Mm-hmm. Next thing you know, not only you'll have a pass, but you might be doing some pro bono work for them. Mm-hmm. Taking pictures, podcasts, etc. So, like we discussed before, everything is going to work. Now moving on, we talked about Blue. Jeff Lightsey Jr., off script. Can you talk about your relationship with these fellow individuals in the same lane and how the relationship is, which I think is great that everyone interacts with everyone, where it can be like my profession, the coaching industry, or it's cutthroat and you can get stabbed in the back by people trying to climb the ladder. Can you talk about your relationship and kind of how everyone's kind of symbiotically working together to build up HBCU sports?
So we're all actually we're really cool with each other. As a matter of fact, me, Off Script, and Blue Bloods, we're actually in a group chat. But we're all cool with each other because we realize that we all have one common goal, and that's to bring as much awareness to these HBCU programs as we can. So we just do it in different ways. So we all support each other's content. We all subscribe to each other. We all share each other's stuff. Like it's never any hate or anything like that. Like we all support each other because we can get a lot further ahead together than we can separate. And we realize that. So we're all. Like, I'm not gonna say we're all best friends and talk every day and everything like that. Nah, but we're cool with each other. We're all cool with each other. We all respect what each other do, what each other does. So
now go ahead. I'm sorry. I know. I understand. There's an African proverb that kind of sums that all up, and it's one of my favorite proverbs. It goes, "Working together, two mice can tie up a lion."
Right. I like that.
I definitely see that what y'all doing because again. There was no one in this space before you guys, and you guys have took it by storm. Again, please keep it up. We talked about some tips to help you grow. I'll give you some more, introduce you some of my contacts as well as the other gentlemen as well. But again, like I just thankful for everything you guys are doing, and I wish you guys the most success. And I'm definitely going to be a follower. As I am now, but I'm going to continue moving forward.
Thank you.
So moving on, everyone is talking about the quote-unquote celebrity coaches. And what people don't realize, this has always been the case. Again, before I went to North Carolina Central, the head coach there was Larry Little. Larry Little was a starting guard on the undefeated Miami Dolphins Super Bowl team. One of my position coaches was Robert Massey. In the 90s, he was a second paid defensive back under Deion Sanders. I have other pro coaches. The gentleman I work for now, Sean Gilbert, he was a number 3 draft pick in the 93 NFL draft, and I think he played like 17 years. He retired with the Carolina Panthers. So there's always been pros coaching at HBCU is just been getting more prominent as of now. Lately, due to that prominence, there's been a paradigm shift where HBCUs are going back to they were akin to the 1970s, which is, again, the last heyday. So can you give your thoughts on these quote-unquote celebrity coaches and their impact not only on the SWAC but the MEAC as well? Because, again, people don't talk about the MEAC, who has Tyrone Wheatley, Morgan State, who's the head coach. And they have some other coaches with NFL pedigree as well. Terry Sims and Bethune-Cookman used to work at Louisville and has been everywhere. So in both conferences. So can you kind of speak on this new wave of coaches in HBC football and what it's doing for the game?
Well, it does nothing but help, in more than one way. Recruiting is flourishing with not only just the Jackson States and the FAMUs, but with a lot of schools. They're getting a lot better. You're starting to see these HBCUs. They aren't really as scared to go after these top prospects anymore. Morgan State is going after one of the most dynamic athletes in the 2024 class from New Jersey, whose name is also Kobe, I believe. And I hope they get him. They've had one of the top dual threat quarterbacks in JUCO on campus for a visit. Like, you're really seeing these schools shoot their shot with these top tier athletes, and it's working out for a lot of them. On top of that, you got people like Hugh Jackson upgrading the facilities, getting flat screen TVs, marble floors, and everything else donated to them. So that's my dog.
Sister's dog.
Yeah, sister's dog. But yeah, they're getting things donated to them, and there's upgrading facilities, and like that's the most important thing for me, that these kids are getting these. They don't necessarily need to have the Power 5 practice facilities and the player lounges and everything like that, but they're getting what they deserve. Like they get to enjoy really being a student athlete at the Division I level, and they're getting more looks because these coaches have more connection to the NFL. The NIL era, these kids are getting deals now. It's nothing but great things happening because of these celebrity coaches, and I love to see it, and hopefully more of these schools can get more celebrity coaches, like Valley. Even though Dancy's doing a great job, hopefully they can get some help from maybe a celebrity's assistant coach or something like that to help upgrade their facilities. But overall, it's a great thing. It's doing nothing but positive things for HBCUs.
Now, speaking of the positivity that these coaches are bringing in, from your opinion, what should these schools be doing to close the gap, not only in recruiting, but close the gap in facilities, marketing, etc.? So basically, if you were an AD in charge of an HBCU, what would you do to put it on the spotlight to be the best in FCS?
You really have to invest in your program, which a lot of these programs still fail to do. Like, a lot of these schools don't want to go all in on their programs, and it's hurting them. So I want to make sure my facilities are up to par. I want to make sure that you actually have the ammo you need to go out and recruit these big time talent to get them here. I want to make sure I provide you with all the tools you need so that you can go out and do your job effectively. On top of that, my marketing team, but you got so much students who you can use for this stuff, like just to give them experience. I need to get my marketing on point.
Message.
You feel me? Like, we're in that age now. There shouldn't be no reason why your Instagram account has not been used in more than 5 years. Like, that's ridiculous to me. These kids are on social media. Like, the reason why these Power Fives are continuing to win is because they give you access to everything. And you have, when it comes to HBCU, sometimes you got to guess for your favorite school. You just don't know what's going on. So, that the marketing needs to get, I'm making sure the marketing is where it needs to be if I'm the AD. Like simple stuff like names on the back of jerseys and everything like that. Like, just bringing it up to current times in college football. We really have to get better at that. And I think if you do that, you close that gap a lot more than you think, to be honest with you.
Definitely, and I agree with you. You had some great points. I also think it's a wonderful idea having students manage the Instagram page. And if not a student that goes to the school, maybe it can be outsourced to someone, outside of the school. Mm-hmm. Like if you live 2 hours away from a certain school, you might can go to the athletic department and say, let me run your Instagram page for 30 days. And if I get it popping, y'all break me off some money. That's just a hypothetical. Right. If someone was trying to go back to school and live 2 hours away from the school and wanted to, give an idea how to get into the athletic department. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
Just a thought, just a hypothetical thought. But if someone did that, I think it would work and it would entrench them in the athletic department. So when they left, they can take that to their graduate school, get more work, and then they come out, they're an industry professional.
For sure. For
Definitely.
sure.
I think whoever follows that path will have ultimate success. Mm-hmm. Now I want to talk about another big topic between the MEAC and the SWAC. It's the FCS playoffs. Now, originally, the MEAC had an automatic bid because they didn't have a Bayou Classic that interfered with the playoffs, but the SWAC did. So they gave up their bid, years ago. And then you got to look at the history. The only HBCU to win the FCS championship was a MEAC school, Florida A&M, and then they came close again. I think like in the 80s, they made it to the Final Four and lost to Youngstown State, I believe. Mm-hmm. But can you kind of talk about the FCS playoffs and what these schools need to do. We saw FAM lose to Southeastern Louisiana, but what does a MEAC or SWAC team have to do to have a long run in the FCS playoffs?
So when it comes to the playoffs, Oscar Blue, we've expressed how these, it would be a good idea for HBCUs to compete in the FCS playoffs. The fans don't want it. HBCU fans don't really care for the playoffs. They are very much satisfied with the Celebration Bowl because of the money they get versus losing money by competing in the playoffs, which is always their number one argument against the playoffs. So, that's why we don't really bring it up on our channels anymore, just because they just reject the idea and they get so upset at the playoffs being mentioned. But because family made it this year, we were all excited, we were all happy, and to see the way they got beat, it was a little disheartening, but it also shows why they need to regularly play outside of the SWAC and in the MEAC, just so they'll know where they stand against these FCS schools. So that way, if you're in a position to be in the playoffs again, you're not surprised by SC Louisiana. You're not taking off your game because you don't play anybody outside of the SWAC, right? I think had they been used to playing some outside games in the FCS, you're a little bit more prepared now. You know where you stand as a conference. As a team, you know where you got to get better at, and maybe that's a different outcome in the game.
I agree with you. Now, one point I would like to add is, well, first of all, a lot of these fans are delusional. They don't want to play outside the conference, but then they complain when they don't have things. So that's one point right there, that these fans don't know what they want. So I don't think you should listen to them because they're used to archaic, the way it was style. Mm-hmm. And we don't use typewriters no more. We're in a computer age. Secondly, again, being in the industry, I see a lot of things. I think the Celebration Bowl should be moved to the beginning of the season. So I think at the end of the year, let's say at the 2021 season, the number one, whoever won the SWAC championship, whoever finished first in the MEAC will play in the Celebration Bowl that year, the beginning of the season, just like they have the BCS kickoff classics. Now, whoever finished second in the SWAC and second in the MEAC will play in the MEAC SWAC Challenge at another location. Right. So that way I'm getting both, and at the end I can still go to the playoffs, because what these people don't realize is, again, it's a television technology age. Mm-hmm. So by being on TV, not only will you get bigger sponsors, and for example, the HBCUs are sponsored by some of the same people that BCS schools are sponsored by, but due to lack of television exposure, we may get 2 television shirts and they get 10. Right. So by playing more television games, they want to have their logo to be broadcast. So they'll give you more clothes. Before a television game, you might get a new shipment in. So the more television games, the more new stuff I get, so it can be fresh when they see me walking off the bus, in the hotel, walking in the stadium, warming up. So I have to give the players and the coaches new stuff. So that compiles over time. So now I got stuff to take home and wear for my friends, give it out to people. And that's what the kids like. They want to show off what they get on Instagram and when they wear it when they go back home. So you're killing that bird right there. You're getting national notoriety. And then again, these television stations, they're going to see, well, your stadium isn't like this. So let's try to make you some money so you can improve it. And we're going to be broadcasting here 4 times a year. So it'll help everything. And no one's really looked at that aspect. So I just want to put that out there and see your thoughts on it.
Yeah, most definitely, and especially the point you made about the kids getting the new gear so they can be able to wear, because they want to look fresh too and everything like that. All that really does play a factor, man. And if we're able to get those things, it turns out like everything in general just becomes a lot better for the SWAC and the MEAC. But like you said, there's so many fans who are stuck in the old days, and part of me gets it. Part of me gets it, right? Because those old guys, they had to sit there and watch the talent, the top talent in the country get taken away by these PWIs, and it never exactly be the same. So now that it's kind of returning back, they don't really want to join predominantly white institutions in anything just because they know how it played out in the first time. But the downside of that is you're so stuck in your ways, you don't want to be progressive with anything, and now the kids are suffering as a whole.
Look at the movie Drumline Kobe, and it's sort of like a Dr. Lee effect where he wants to play Flight of the Bumblebee. The kids want to get crunked. So at the end, they do a little bit of both.
A perfect example of that, man. Like it's exactly what it is. They are Dr. Lee with the Flight of the Bumblebee. Like that's exactly what they are.
So last question. Next to the last question. Again, everyone, please subscribe to the CFL podcast on YouTube, along with Jeff Lightsey, the Black Bloss channel. We got Zach McKinnell of the Blue Bloods, Big Zach right here. And again, shout out to Zach. He doesn't have to be covering HBCU sports, but he does it for the love of the game. So super props. And then you got Off Skip right here. So again, I want to put all their tags up. So again, we need another CFL prediction. 2022 SWAC and MEAC champions and Celebration Bowl champion.
It's a sequel. It's going to be a sequel. And the reason why I say that is because, number one, they're the only school that could be a threat to South Carolina State right now is Delaware State, because that defense has gotten better, right? Like that secondary is a lot stronger. But everybody else is still a couple of years away from really knocking South Carolina State off. And this class South Carolina State got just put them that much more ahead of everybody. So I think they're getting ready for a North Carolina A&T type reign in the MEAC. As far as the SWAC, I put Jackson State there because they only needed a couple pieces to get back and finish the job from last season. They needed to upgrade the offensive line. They've done so in a tremendous way. You got an embarrassment of riches in your receiving core who could really be a Power 5 or just an FBS receiving core in general. You got Travis Hunter. Your secondary doesn't have a weakness now. You're just an overall complete team. Oh, and you have the best quarterback in the conference now, especially now that Akil Glass is going. So, I think they're the most ready to go right now. Everybody's giving it to these SWAC schools because of the changes that they've made in the offseason. But I need to see how these schools put it together. A lot of people giving it to Grambling State because of Hugh and what he's able to do. No, I need to see Hugh put it together. I need to see how he's going to be able to coach in the SWAC, right? Him being in the NFL means absolutely nothing to me. Nick Saban was in the NFL too, and we saw how that turned out. So I got to see it from these other schools. But Jackson State is the most complete team in the SWAC right now, other than FAMU, who's ready to go. And FAMU still needs to find out who their quarterback is going to be. So for that reason, it is Jackson State versus SC State again.
So who you think gets the Celebration Bowl next year?
Who do I think win it?
Yeah.
All right.
I know it's an early prediction, but since we're on the topic.
I'll say Jackson State pulls it out because they don't underestimate South Carolina State now. They pull it out closely. It ain't no blowout. It ain't gonna be no blowout. But I think they pull it out because of the help that you've went and got, the reinforcements that you've went and got in. It'll be a battle, and it'll make for a great competition. But I think they'll pull it out. Barely.
This next. I think I agree with you too. Now, this next statement is based off of knowledge and bias. Bias because, again, I graduated from Grambling, and then knowledge because I watch a lot of film. If you look at what Coach Jackson did with Hickbottom last year, I remember Hickbottom was at Grambling lost his job, transferred to Tennessee State. And look at the progression of Tennessee State through last season, and particularly the game, how they played Jackson State. That game was closer than people thought. And again, if you look at Hickbottom's progression through last year under Coach Jackson, that led me to be confident in what he could do on a college level and what he could do if he brought in his own pieces. So I don't know if you kind of noticed that, but again, the way he was able to use him, if you watched Tennessee State film last year, again, I watched a lot of film for obvious reasons we discussed. And that's one thing I did notice, the progression of Tennessee State's offense and the play of Jeremy Hickbottom, where the SWAC coaches couldn't do anything with him. That's why I'm very confident that it's going to be a Grambling-Jackson State kind of duality for a while, with eventually Grambling taking the upper hand.
You know, I do believe that the biggest threat to Coach Prime is Hugh Jackson. And, you know, the fact that he was able to come in and have this much success off the bat, you could really say his success immediately coming into Grambling was just a little bit better than Deion's, right? So he really is the biggest threat to Coach Prime and Jackson State. From him being a coordinator is different from him being a head coach. I have no doubt in my mind that he was going to be successful. Let me say that. I'm not skeptical at all, but I just have to see it. Like, I need to see him coach a full game as a head coach, you know, like deal with adversity, make the adjustments, you know, and prove that you can pull out a game like that. But I mean, with the way he's taking over the West Coast with the recruiting and getting these kids the way he is, I have no doubt in my mind that Grambling is on top where Jackson State is very, very quickly.
Now, speaking of the West Coast, I got to drop a Sports 101 nugget. Most people don't realize that there was a great migration from Louisiana and Alabama to Los Angeles, California. If you look at Snoop Dogg, a lot of the people that's from there, their family is from Louisiana and Alabama. During my tenure at Grambling, the Los Angeles Tiger Club had a ton of people there, and they would ship their cars on trains. Sometimes for Thanksgiving, they go to their grandma or auntie's house. So, and then when you look at, there's no black colleges in the state of California, and they also pose the rule of not having to follow affirmative action. So if you look at UCLA, USC, the California schools, their acceptance rate of black students that are non-athletes is minuscule because they don't follow affirmative action policies. So essentially, Coach Jackson has Louisiana and the state of California as his home states, and most people don't realize that.
Exactly.
All right, so again, thank you so much. Again, this is Kobe Orr from the CFL podcast. Can you leave us with any final thoughts, and please plug your channel, what you do, and just tell everybody where you can find you so you can get some more subscribers and be the best you can be.
All right, so on Instagram, you can follow me at Kobe Orr. Instagram, Twitter, even TikTok if you got one. All right, COBIORR, all that together, Kobe Orr. I'm not hard to find at all. Follow me on the CFL podcast. Subscribe to my channel on YouTube, the CFL podcast. I'm getting into the MEAC a lot more. Like, I'm going to get a lot more in depth in the MEAC as well as the SWAC. So you don't want to miss out on what your team is doing in the offseason because, you know, these social media accounts for your teams, although they're back active and up and running, it's still going to take them some time to catch up. So if you want to know the little insights and nuances of what's going on with your program, hit me. Just follow me. Hit me up. If you got a question about your program, hit DM me. I answer all of those. Might take me a little while, but I answer all of those. I get back to you. Just, follow me there.
All right. Thank you so much. And again, for you guys, thank you for being in this lane. Hopefully next year, some of you guys can include the CIAA and SIAC. I know their fans is hunkering. If you ever subscribe to Onidon, that's a fan page, and that talks about Black college sports. Again, there's no representation for the CIAA and SIAC, so right. Maybe someone can do that next. So in closing, again, Jeff Lightsey, Zach McKinnell, Abrion Scott and Kobe Orr from CFL Podcast have changed the narrative and broadcast options for HBCU sports, and all four of them should be commended. In their own way, they've created a huge following with great insight, production, and commentary, which will continue in the future. And again, hopefully someone can pick up SIAC and CIAA sports, and particularly basketball. CIAA basketball tournament, biggest tournament in the world. How great would it be if these men, if they were backed by major companies and sponsorships? The CFL podcast was sponsored by Red Bull, Mountain Dew, etc. They can get research assistants, production teams, and truly shine their light on HBCU sports. Again, thank you, Mr. Orr, for bringing yourself this week. Thank you for joining Sports101 and SportsZone Chicago. You're welcome back any day that ends in a Y. Thank all you fans for tuning in. Again, I'm Jamar Harp. You can follow me on Twitter at Coach_Harp412 and Facebook under Jamar Harp. Make sure you get social with CFL Podcast by going to YouTube, search CFL. Get social with SportsZone Chicago by following us on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. We're launching something new, SportsZone Chicago at night, so you can have nightly shows. And then we have a great announcement coming up in 2 months that's going to change the game, especially for a Black-owned sports podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, and download the app. The app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Again, thank you, Mr. Ordis, for coming on this week. I would love to be on your show at any time and give some of my insight as a coach and what I do in the industry, and just let people know so more people may want to get into coaching as well that look like us. So if you ever need that, you got me anytime. You can tune into my show Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. Again, this is Sports 101. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. We were blessed this week by Mr. Kobe Orr, CFL Podcast. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Orr. We'll see everyone next week, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. And I'm gone.